Every Night is Game Night, episode 54, Gen Con Rapid Fire Reviews, part 2. Hey guys, welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. This is Anthony once again with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
Guys, we are back, and this week we are talking about more games released this summer. Yes, because there are more. Give us more. We have 7 more reviews of games that came out in the last 2 or 3 months, either previewed earlier in the summer or released at Gen Con. As we said, we had a lot of awesome stuff came out in the last couple months, but this is all the games we've been playing. Want to get these out to you, let you know whether or not you should pick them up or not.
And let us know but we're always playing with format here on Every Night is Game Night. There's interviews, there's longer form, like deep dives of games. This is the first time we're doing this kind of lots of reviews at once, not a lot of discussion back and forth, just, kind of our thoughts of games. Let us know if this is a format that you'd like us to keep going with, at least occasionally, or if you never want us to do this again. So, because this is definitely a lot. But, a lot of games, and they're all pretty good. They range from pretty good to like some of our favorites of the year. So we hope you're enjoying that, what we're putting out. And yeah, that's basically it. Anthony, how you feeling so far? You ready to keep going?
Yeah, man. Got to talk about these games. They're all in my head.
That's right. Okay, so like we were saying before last time, a lot of lighter games. So we're going to get through the lighter games, and hopefully we'll get some really good, meaty, heavy stuff but towards the end of the year. Except for Spirit Island. Go back and listen to the other episode to hear about Spirit Island. But for the most part, some lighter games. Let's see if you have fun with them. So I'm going to start off this week, and I'm going to talk about Flipships. So this is another Renegade game and another game designed by Kane Klenko. He is not their in-house designer, but it feels that way, doesn't it? He does a lot of their stuff. So I was told before, I played the game, but I was told not to call this a dexterity game. I wanted to, but they said, no, this is a flicking game. So apparently they're different things. I didn't know that. Apparently dexterity is stacking, and now you're flicking. So it's once you hear a flicking game, it's light, it's family friendly, and all that kind of stuff. And for this, the angle that this game takes is that they turn the old Space Invaders video game into a board game. So if you don't know Space Invaders because you're a millennial and you're pretty young, you're not really familiar, imagine rows of aliens kind of starting at the top of the board, and then every round they descend one, and then more aliens kind of get added to the top, more aliens, more aliens, more aliens. At the bottom of the board, you have a one little ship, and you're trying to shoot as many aliens as possible, and that's the game. So in this game, the aliens are represented by a deck of cards, and they're just you're gonna get cards every round, and they're gonna slowly descend towards you. And so you're not shooting anything in this game. What you're doing is you're flipping your ship. Very, very literally. So you have this little wooden block, and you have a ship token, which is about the size of a large coin cardboard, and you're flicking it. You flick it with your thumb. You flick it with, your whatever you're good at, whatever will get you a nice, good arc so that they land on the table on a ship. That is how you do damage to the ship. So you're going to have a stack of these, a small stack, and you're going to flick them, and they're going to land on each ship, and they're going to do some damage, or eventually you're going to get like special powers, and you get to do kind of different things. And, I'm going to hit this ship and the next ship. I'm going to hit all 4 ships. I'm going to knock the ship off course, or whatever it is. But that's the essence of the game. There really isn't a lot to it. You're taking your ship and you're flicking them at this descending row of cards before too many of the cards enter into your home space. So once they get past like a certain line, then they kind of destroy they hit your quote unquote home world. And if too many of them get past, then you lose. So the game, so that's most of the game. And then the game's kind of culmination is that there's this kind of milk crate looking thing, like you construct like an open box and it's going to just kind of hover there at the top of the board. If you are good enough, you can flick your piece all the way across the table into that box, and it's representing damage to that mothership. And that's, you get a couple chances to do that. So hopefully by the time you get there, you've built up some powers, you get good at flicking, because when we played, we were really bad at first. Ships coming in all the time, but eventually we kind of got better at it. And I think a couple of guys actually got it into that milk crate thing. It's not that easy. So that's the game. It's not, we're not talking about a high strategy game here. Super, super light game for families. So for me, I saw that there was a lot of potential for laughs and good family fun. I think that the theme is good. I think the artwork is and the graphic design and the color scheme and all that stuff is really evocative and nice. At the end of the day, though, I kind of forgot the game, if it makes sense. So I mean, I remember the gameplay. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to talk about it, but it was kind of a forgettable experience in the sense that, well, I played Ice Cool recently, and if I'm gonna flick something, I'm gonna flick a penguin. You can get little you can do all sorts of stuff with that little like kind of that little it's like a plastic weighted penguin. You could kind of do tricks with it. Here, you're not really doing tricks with the disc. You're just flicking it. And if you're bad at it, then you're gonna have a real bad time with this game. Unless you just like to suck, that's perfectly fine. But you're just really flicking. I mean, maybe you can get into the aim and stuff. If you can, like if you're like a dart player or some kind of like player like that, then you might really like this game. You might really get into like, aiming and, getting this thing. For me, I'm a little bit clumsier and I have my flicking game in a sense. I don't play a ton of these. So this was kind of like, okay, I'm going to move on from this, but I can see people really, really getting into this game and liking it. So that is, kind of my review of Flipships. Not quite for me, but it could be for you if you like darts and flicking and just landing stuff on stuff. Anthony, you've played this game, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm that far off from where you're at. It's fun. I like these flicking games too, but there's limited space for them. It doesn't do a ton. And while I really, really like the presentation, like the overall graphic design and the theme and just the way it looks and feels on the table is fantastic, I'm really bad at it, which doesn't normally... I mean, that doesn't normally bother me too much because I'm bad at all these games. It's just because you're doing the same thing every single time and I'm bad at it every single time. It's not... I don't know, man. Like, I feel like Ice Cool is a great example. Occasionally I get lucky and it just shoots like sideways through a door and you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Like you can do different things with the flick. Like, you could in high school, you could kind of flick the penguin so it goes above the board and, or it goes like it takes this weird swivel. So you're kind of doing different stuff. In this game, you're aiming the trajectory differently, but fundamentally it's the same action, So like in other flicking games, like Catacombs or in, Flick 'em Up or something like that. There's different ways in which they mix it up so that even if you're kind of, stinky at it, you're not doing the same thing you stink at every single time. You're at least, you're mixing it up. Maybe you're trying to get it above a ramp. If it's Flick 'em Up and you're trying to knock the dude's hat off or whatever. Just that little bit of difference would have made a big, kind of impact for me. But the fact you're doing the same thing every time kind of says, okay, I could see this game being fun, but that, it kind of is what it is for me. So a good game, but not for me.
Yeah, exactly. I had fun with it, but I haven't really gone back to it. All right. So the next one I was going to talk about is Triplock. This is the new chip theory game. They did have it at Gen Con in an early release, and then it shipped to backers, I think the week or two after that. So this is, unlike all their other games, Hoplomachus and Too Many Bones, which are these big, massive productions, Triplock comes in a small tuck box, Friday-sized, and doesn't have a ton of components. Now, the component quality is the same that you're used to. You have the big, heavy chips, and neoprene mat, solid quality dice, but there just aren't a lot of them. The basic idea of the game, though, is you're trying to solve these different locks. Out of the box, there is a solo game. It's called The Station, and there's going to be 4 different rooms in it that you have to complete with the different AI options. You're going to go through the master lock, I think they call the mat, and then it has 3 different locks available, and then 1 hidden lock. And so each of these locks consists of 3 chips. You have 2 fail safes, and then the mechanism chip, which is the yellow one that goes in the middle. And so what you're doing is you're rolling dice in your turn and then manipulating these locks by flipping them, swapping at them, peeking to see what they are. And you're trying to get the symbols to match up and line up in a certain order based on the scenario that you're in, and also the diagram cards that you'll be drawing from. And so the game is manipulated in a couple ways. You have... First up, you have the different room cards that are going to have different scenarios and different locks that you're trying to work towards. And then you have the different characters who each have their own different skill. So out of the box, I think the game comes with 6 of these characters. So you have different options for kind of how to approach the game from that perspective. And it's pretty quick, compared to other chip theory games, which can be these big, long productions. The average game of this, once you know the rules pretty well, is like 15, 20 minutes. So it definitely falls into that small box, quick, accessible solo play. And it definitely works from that angle. Now, the game itself, I really enjoyed it for the basic idea here. Like, you're manipulating all these pieces, you're trying to use your abilities in the right order, you're trying to manipulate the dice and match up these different symbols. But at the end of the day, it did feel relatively abstract, even with all the extra stuff layered onto it. You have the characters, they come with these big mats with like a backstory. You have the room itself, the scenario has this big backstory, and then each of the cards has additional story on it. So you can really get into it, and there's a lot of story that goes to it. But at the end, you're just rolling dice, moving chips around, and trying to match up symbols. Now, I'm not one to knock a game for
what are you talking about? You love that.
Exactly. No, but it is, like, I did find it, I don't know what it was. It just didn't quite capture my attention as much as it could. It's hard to explain. It's just, you're really just lining up these different symbols. Now, did I enjoy the basic mechanisms of how that plays out? Yes. Is it a game that I've gone back to and been excited to play? For whatever reason, not really. It just hasn't really captured my attention. And maybe it's just because it's kind of short. So like the puzzle element of it, it's quick, and then you either get it or you don't, and then you move on. And then it doesn't have this like overarching gameplay to it, even though you could obviously do multiple rooms in a row and do all this. It hasn't really captured me in the same way that some of these other bigger games that have similar mechanisms but across a larger puzzle structure do. Is it well constructed though? Of course. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's tight, it's quick, it's easy. I wouldn't say it's necessarily easy to learn. The rulebook is a little obtuse in a couple places. Production quality is fantastic, of course. It's chip theory games. So I like it. I like having it. I'm definitely going to play it some more because I want to get through all these different combinations and try them out. And there's more solo content available that came as part of the Kickstarter. So there's a lot here to play through, and I'm definitely going to try to tap into that. So it's definitely not a game that I'm going to avoid or don't want to play anymore. It just hasn't really grabbed me the way I thought it would. It's not like one of those must-have, must-play games. But it's good. It's solid.
I promise. We like games. Let me get into a game that, I'll be honest with you, blew my socks off the first time I played. So this is Magic Maze. You may have heard of this game. This was a Spiel des Jahres runner-up from this past year. It was designed by Casper Lapp and published by a lot of different companies around the world. In America, I believe it's Dude Games. So why did this game get the nomination? Why did this game get a lot of buzz? So, hey, Anthony, it's a cooperative real-time game.
Woo! Woo! Another one. Why wasn't this on the last episode?
Very, very, very different though. So, so the theme of the game is that you're these little adventurers, and I don't know why they decided to do it this way, but you're adventurers in a shopping mall, and yeah, I know. So then in this game, you're trying to direct the adventurers, and they're little meeples. It's not like, this isn't a huge production or anything. So they're little adventurers, and they're kind of going off on a small grid map. And what you're going to do is you're going to expand the map as you go around. So, kind of revealing tiles and all that kind of thing. And you're going to directing them to the store where they can buy their quote unquote special weapon. So they all have to get there at once, and then they all have to leave. So apparently they're stealing it. So they go to so you're directing them in this world that's getting a little bit bigger. You're finding the shops, you're landing all four at the same time, and then you go. So on the face of it, does not sound very interesting. I only put that down as context because of how you approach it. That's what makes the game fun. So you don't control the pawns. So that was a thing that was a mental barrier I had to kind of break down at the beginning when I played this game. It's not like I have a pawn, you have a pawn, and we just kind of direct ourselves. What we have is a personal tile with an arrow on it. And the arrow is pointing in one of the four cardinal directions. And so you are in charge whenever a piece needs to move in the direction of that arrow, so north. you're in charge whenever any of the pieces have to go north. So, which is pretty neat. So, because you have to pay attention to all 4 tiles. You have to pay attention when new tiles come out. Okay, this adventure needs to go north, so I have to go that way. If because you're making like twists and turns, you're going through the maze part of the Magic Maze title. You have to coordinate with your other people who have the different arrows. So like if you have to go north, northwest, south, west, north, you have to coordinate, and all of you have to like kind of move the piece that way in order to get to where you're going. So that's one wrinkle, the fact that you're not controlling the character. Another wrinkle is that you're not talking. This is a completely silent game. So you have to read the board and in silence figure out where people are going. The only way to communicate is you have this larger red pawn thing, like a little bowling pin, and you just tap the other person and just like, hey. So you're trying to tell them that to do whatever's on their arrows, but you can't tell them which piece to move, and you can't tell them basically anything. You just have to tap their arrow and hope they figure out what direction they're going in. So so that's even more stuff. And then even after that, the tiles don't only have the arrows on them, they have like other little special powers. So like one tile has like the north arrow and a portal. So there's different portals around the area. You can teleport around the board. So if you're tapping somebody, they have to figure out whether you want them to move north or activate the portal. Move north or go up an escalator. So that's another symbol. I mean, like if you can, I'm impressing upon you like the silent communication, and the rulebook actually says that the only thing you could do is tap and stare at them like disappointedly. It's like, oh, come on, dude, let's go. You can't like point. It's so easy. It's like Hanabi in that way. Like in Hobby, it's really, really easy to cheat. It's like, this is a 3. You're not really supposed to do that. Like you can, it's so easy to do that in this game, but if you want to get the full experience, don't do that. So that's basically like the game, and it's super fun. Like I had so much fun with it. I was so excited about it. And I saw that it was a 1 to 6 player game. 1 to 8, actually. It goes up to 8 players, which is crazy. Don't like it at that max count, but it still actually supports 6-ish people pretty well. So I was like, all right, wow, let's play this solo. How could this work solo? This must be amazing too. The solo is different. So you're doing the same stuff. You're controlling all 4 characters, and you're moving them up and down the thing. Oh, I forgot to mention there's a timer. So there's a sand timer. So you have to do this all in a timer. So that's the other thing that is crazy. And there's certain spots on the board where you can turn the timer over. So like if you time it right, you can get a lot of extra time to do stuff. Hard to time right though. So all of that is in the solo. All of it is in the solo. But instead of having all the tiles available to you, you put them face down in a deck. And if you want to do anything, you turn over the tile and you do whatever it says. If you run out of action that way, you turn over another piece of the tile and you do whatever that says. So, and you keep on turning over the deck. If you run out of tiles, you flip them over and you just do it again. And all of a sudden, it took a game that was like rich in conversation and like silent conversation, rich in communication, rich in coordination, and it turns it into this game where it's half figuring out what to do with basically your right hand, and your left hand, you are literally flipping these tiles. Tile. Oh, I need this. And then you flip the whole thing over. So it's like, and you're doing this fast. You have to do it a lot. Like you're going to turn over the deck a bunch. If that sounds crazy, it is. People are really struggling with this on BGG. I think people have only beaten the first scenario barely because it's like you have to have like dexterity in your offhand just to be able to pull this off. Ugh, man, this game is amazing. And this solo is so, I don't want to say it's bad because people like this, but it is so different. It takes so many elements of what was awesome about the game and replaces it with this manual dexterity, flip the deck a bunch of times. I mean, I'm not in this board game stuff because I have awesome dexterity, as I discussed with Flipships. It went like, I really was like, wow, this game's like an 8.5. This game's like a 9. I love this game. I'm going to get it. And then when I played the solo, I was like, oh, man. So not bad, but it's too like way too much of a different thing to really get excited about. But if you like what you heard, at least for multiplayer, then this game is innovative. I haven't played anything like it. Real-time cooperative undersells what the game does because there's the silent communication and the not controlling a piece, you control a direction, blah, blah, blah. So much innovative, good stuff here. The solo just has that one element that just, so that's it. Great game. The solo is a little bit touchy for me. That's Magic Maze from Dude Games.
I'll have to give this one a go. I've now heard a glowing recommendation, and Chris hated it. So,
it's funny because I took it to my game group. My game group is like, they tend towards kind of heavier strategy games. I mean, not like heavy, we all like our cooperative games, but we don't tend to like time games. My group, and they don't like to, the rush and stuff like that. And they hated it. This game, it's like, I put it in that group of like Millennium Blades or Galaxy Trucker, or these games that are like really ambitious. They really do crazy stuff. So you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. And there's no middle. Nobody's going to walk out of this game going, that was okay. I love when games do that. I love when games try stuff. Like we're over here reviewing this, what, an 11th, 12th game, and and like among hundreds, and how many of these games just kind of do iterations of very similar things. This game is like really out of the box, and I loved it. I get why Chris hated it, but the solo, what a miss for me.
That's unfortunate. Well, let's go from innovative and different to more of the same.
So like we're talking about innovative and different, and now we follow it up with 3 expansions to games that we already have. So
yes.
Oh well, that's the way it goes.
It's how it works, guys. So the first up is Terraforming Mars, Hellas and Elysium. This is the first expansion for Terraforming Mars. I think they have like 5 planned. I'm not sure how they're going to add that much to the game, but this first one at least is well received, I think, by most people, because it is 2 new maps. And that's it. There's nothing else in the package. You open it up, it's one board, double-sided map. You got Hellas, the southern wilds, that's the South Pole there, and then Elysium, which is basically the other side of the planet from the one you played in the original game, and that is it. And the bulk of what's different about these maps comes in the new milestones and the new awards. So you have a different approaches and different strategies you can take, obviously, for getting those points. That doesn't apply in the solo version because you don't utilize milestones or awards when you're playing solo. So the main difference, the only difference really, if you're playing these solo, is that the map is different. And the little color spaces around the board for your score are either blue or green, which, mix things up a little bit instead of yellow. So first up, we got the Hellas map. It's got the South Pole, which has an interesting combination of like heat production and like a nice little cluster for your oceans, so you can make sure you're getting income off of those. Lots and lots of mining opportunities here too. Really, again, the major difference here is like placement options. Are you going to get, a bunch of plants? Are you going to get a bunch of mining options? You're going to pick up the heat. Interesting ideas, and it does change how you play each of the corporations. On the flip side, you have Elysium, where you have this nice, really strong band of plants for placement bonuses in the middle of the planet, and the oceans are all in the north. So on that map, you're almost certainly playing solo, going to start in the same area every time. You probably only have 2 or 3 good starting options there. So of the 2, I think Hellas is my favorite for solo play because it has probably 3 or 4 different good options for where to start. But again, this is more of the same for Terraforming Mars. If you like Terraforming Mars and you like the solo play, then you should get these maps because it's more options, and you're probably playing this with other people too, and then they're definitely worth picking up. I'm personally excited to see what the next expansion with the Venus board brings, because it's actually going to add new mechanisms to the game. But for now, these are good, and it's fun to have new stuff to do, and if nothing else, to mix it up a little bit with the solo playthroughs. It seemed very well balanced. I haven't seen any issues yet with the few corporations I've run through. So worth getting if you're a Terraforming Mars fan.
So, I mean, not to kind of harp on cost or anything, but like you're paying over $20 for these boards, right? Or am I getting that price wrong?
No, that's right. And it's Stronghold, so of course it's overpriced.
Okay. So, I mean, is that like, it's only boards, right? So I guess is that for the cost conscious gamer, is it worth considering getting, if it's only board, there's no mechanical gameplay change.
Yeah, there is no reason to buy this unless you play the game a lot. If you've played Terraforming Mars like at least a dozen times in the last 6 months, then yeah, you might consider this. If you're not playing this game like once every week or two, then you're getting plenty out of that base map. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing broken about it. There's nothing boring about it. It's just, this is a nice, interesting twist on the game that adds some new mechanisms and new end goals for people who play the game a lot. I play the game a lot, so I think it's great, and I'm willing to spend the $15-20 for it. If you don't play very much, you're just adding another map that's probably not even going to fit inside that box, and so, I'm not sure it's necessarily worth it. It's not bad, it's just, it's like a Power Grid map. If you don't play Power Grid very often, you don't need more maps, and it's almost exactly the same idea.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Terraforming Mars right now, and I don't play it nearly enough. I'm hoping that when the app comes next year, I'll get some more plays of it, because my group we have people that play it, but there's just so much else to play. But I like Terraforming Mars. It's really good. So 2 more games that I really like, and these are 2 expansions that on the whole that I will recommend. So here we go. We got Eldritch Horror Cities of Ruin. So it is designed by one of the original designers of the game, Nikki Valens, published obviously by Fantasy Flight Games. So in order to do this review, I'll try to be as quick as possible, but I do want to give context in terms of where this expansion is in terms of the other groups. So there's 7 expansions, and this game did not come out that long ago, and there's already 7. So you're on bloat watch when it comes to these expansions. So let me make it kind of a little bit easy for you. So the people ask about the big box expansions. My personal opinion about the big box expansions is that they're okay. I've bought the first 2, and I found that I played them once, and then I just don't play them again. There's enough there. So like the Terraforming Mars map, you have to play this game a lot, and you have to love this game in order to get those big box expansions, because they're really expensive. I don't know that they add too much in terms of difference, but they're cool for theme, and they're there for people who just super, super love the game. So the small box expansions, however, are a little bit different because they're relatively more inexpensive, and they do add enough content to kind of make it worth it. So the first one, Forsaken Lore, is the one that people get because it just adds more cards. In fact, I think the base game really needs at least one of these small box expansions. If you buy Forsaken Lore, you're just going to get some more cards into it. It is enough to just make it feel like, okay, this game is really going to hum, and I'm going to get some diversity of the game now. So Forsaken Lore is probably at the top of expansions to get. The second and third ones, Strange Remnants and Signs of Carcosa, they add some things that I didn't love. Strange Remnants just added a Mystic Ruins deck, which is basically another deck. They just call it something different. It acts the same as anything else, in my opinion. The third expansion I was found really skippable. It added the impairment tokens, which if you know the game, you have skills and you can buff your skills, but these kind of lower your skills. So it makes the game harder. So if you like the game harder, then that's great. But I think the game's hard enough. Especially if you with certain of the creatures, and lowering your skills is not that fun. So I think that Size of Carcosa, is kind of a pass for me. But this expansion, you get this is Cities of Ruin. The concept here is that you are going to destroy the cities. So what does that mean? That means that, if you know the cities, you can usually go there, have an adventure, and buff a skill, or get a clue, or do something kind of cool that it will forward your progress. In this one, instead the city is destroyed, and you put a little token on it, you get a little card that has narrative, and then when you go there, you just have a different kind of adventure. So the theme of the adventure, like the way the narrator is like, okay, you're helping evacuation, you're saving a building, or all that kind of stuff. And they're more complex adventures. They're basically like outer world adventures. So the outer world adventures are very complex. They're multi-step. These work kind of similar to that. There's a little bit of differences, but for the most part, it's the same. And that's what it adds. Like it has, another bad guy. The bad guy will destroy cities. It has ways to incorporate the city destroying, and it happens on a regular basis, enough basis the way they did it mechanically. It's not just cards that'll disappear in the deck. That's a big worry when it comes to bloat bloaty games like this that you can integrate it and you never see it because there's just too many cards in the deck, you will definitely seed city destruction. Like they do it, they attach it to the Doom track or the Omen track, so you're gonna enjoy the expansion. I put this kind of second best. It leapt ahead of the big box games. It leapt ahead of the other two expansions. I really like the theme integration. My only criticism is that I found that it was a little bit risk averse. So if you're gonna do a really cool idea, I would have hoped that they just really explore some different ways to, destroy cities and different effects that it would have on the game. It's basically just another outer world, but the outer world is in Tokyo now. And obviously, if you get all the city destroyed, then the game is over, and the stories are different, but mechanically, it felt the same. It basically was like the outer world stretching and just incorporating more cities. So I was a bit disappointed in that. I was hoping for something a little bit more daring. Maybe at this point, Eldritch Horror is too far along in the system, and we're just not going to get like a daring, let's blow this out and do something different type thing. Like Terraforming Mars is doing that. Like Phoenix Next is adding new mechanisms. I wouldn't count this as new mechanisms. I just count this as like iterating what was already there and just putting a different theme on it. So if that sounds okay to you, like if you want to do the same stuff, then get Eldritch Horror City of Ruin. If you were hoping for something a little bit more like me, then, it's kind of buyer beware. But who am I? People like the same stuff, and they like more and more of the same stuff, and they like just a little wrinkle of it. So if that sounds good to you, I do rank it second. If you're going to get expansions, get this one right after getting Forsaken Lore. The next review I'm going to do really, really quickly because I can't talk about it too much. The first rule of Time Stories is you can't talk about Time Story scenarios. This is Time Stories Lumen Fide. This is the 7th scenario for Time Stories. Actually, no, this is the 6th. The 7th one is coming out pretty soon, the 6th one. Not really going to say too much about it. The theme, just reading off the back of the box, you're in medieval Spain during the Reconquista, which is a time period where there's Moors, Muslims, and Christians, and they're kind of vying for political and religious control. Your mission is going to be to infiltrate an envoy of the papacy and like do something. spoiler, and that's it. Like that's all you get. And what I will say, so there's a couple things I'll say. First, people might like flag with a theme, like Christians, Muslims. Oh my God, they might do something really dumb and offend somebody. I can honestly assure you that they don't. In fact, I think the theme integration is a little bit light and lacking because they didn't want to step on those toes. It's there, but it could have been in a lot of different places where you have to sneak into something and do something. So I think it just adds to the style, adds to the mood. But I didn't think the theme was well integrated, but at the same time, that's probably good for some people because it does, the religious thing kind of touches a lot of, it gets a little touchy. So in terms of when I evaluate Time Stories modules in a non-spoiler way, I'll kind of talk about it in 3 ways. So it's the actual narrative quality of it. There's the puzzly, abstract logic puzzle part of it. And then there's the skill checks, dice rolling, all that kind of thing. Each module has their own emphasis. I'd say Expedition Endurance is big on narrative. The first module, Asylum, was big on the puzzle, and it had other stuff. The Marcy case was very skill checky. You rolled more dice than that than anything. This one has all 3. It's bigger. It's a bigger module. It's like Prophecy of Dragons big, so there's room for all 3. But I would say that it's probably more on the skill checky side, and it has a logic puzzle. Spoiler. So it's not just the narrative puzzle. It has like these logic puzzles that are really, really tough. So if you like that, and if you like it on that end, I felt the story wasn't as well realized as some of the other ones, but it's still good. A lot of good puzzles. Skill checks are there. I really enjoyed this. This is Prophecy of Dragons, my favorite. The other 2, Asylum and Lumen Fide, are kind of neck and neck for my second favorite. Really enjoyed it. Can't wait to talk about it. I'm actually working on a crossover with another podcast to talk about in full spoilers people who I know have played and enjoy the scenario. Keep tuned for that to hear more spoilers, but I give a big thumbs up to Time Stories Lumen Fide.
All right, so the last game we're going to talk about is not an expansion at all. It's a big, heavy game. Well, not a heavy game, like physically heavy maybe. And that's Summit the board game.
Would you say this is the summit of our podcast reviews? Oh, I did it on purpose. Oh,
you set it up nicely. So this game is about mountain climbing. You're trying to get to the peak of this mountain and back to the base camp in one piece. And so out of the box, the game comes with 3 ways to play. There is a competitive mode that uses this whole karma system. And then you can flip the board over. It's a 2-sided board, actually, so using a completely different board. And you can play cooperative or solo. And the cooperative solo doesn't use any of the karma cards. You remove anything competitive from the decks. And you're just trying to get to the top and back again in one piece and survive. So playing it solo, you can play with just one mountain climber. You can play with more than one, as you would in any cooperative game. I've done it with both, and it is interesting. So to talk about this game, I feel like you really do have to talk about both sides of it, which we don't really have the time or space for here. So I am doing a more comprehensive review of this that'll be on the website. That'll talk about both the competitive side and the cooperative elements, and then the solo play kind of all together. Here, I just want to talk about the solo play. And the basic mechanisms of the game are fairly simple. On your turn, you're going to place out, well, basically you're going to move a certain number of movement points based on your player mat. And the number of movement points available to you has to do with how much weight you're carrying, which will vary based on how much food you're carrying and how much oxygen you have. And so those things are going to adjust on your mat pretty frequently. So you're going to be constantly moving those as you consume food. You move that down, you decrease the weight, you increase the speed. You're constantly moving these things back and forth. And more likely than not, you're constantly forgetting to move them back and forth and therefore not necessarily moving the right amount. But as you get into the flow of it, hopefully you remember and can do all this accurately. And so then you use those movement points. You're going to move along these different rope lines that are on the tiles in front of you. And so each knot on the rope lines is one movement point. You move up, and whenever you reach the end of one, you're going to place a tile from your hand. On these, there's the normal ones where you just move one for one. There are, I can't remember the exact names of these, but there's the yellow ones, they're like slippery or icy, where you're going to slow down a little bit. And then there are ones where there's just a lot more knots there, so it just takes longer to get through it. And so some of these things can hurt. You draw extra event cards if you hit certain things. But really, the goal of the game is to get these on there, get them as efficiently as possible, get to the peak, place your flag, get all the way back down to the base camp. As you go through this, you're going to be rolling different dice. The dice will come up with, I think there's a blizzard icon, there's different levels of snow. And these things will impact, how much food you're going to have to consume or how much bad things might happen to you as you move up. There's also event cards you'll deal with. There's a whole item deck that you'll be drawing from and different things you can make available. These things can alternately, most of them help you in some way. You can only carry as much as you want to carry or are able to carry based on the weight that's available to you, but you also have a Sherpa along with you who can carry extra food, extra oxygen, and some of these item cards. So they come along with you and you can swap stuff out with them if you want to kind of load up on additional items as you move up. And so out of the box, the game has a whole bunch of different possible difficulty levels. So you can start it at the very bottom, which just is sunny. And then as you move up, so it'll move up this chart every time you roll the blizzard icon on the die. So there's a 1 in 6 chance that it's going to move up. If you start at the bottom, it's not going to get very far. It's pretty darn easy. And to be perfectly honest, a little boring. If you start it higher up, then you're going to utilize more oxygen and more food every time that gets rolled, and it gets a little bit harder. So the higher up you start it, the harder the game theoretically gets. You have an hour tracker. You're trying to see how many hours in which you can get it done. That's going to impact your score at the end. Ultimately, you're trying to survive. When you do survive, you get a score based on how long it took you. I got to be honest, I didn't really have a ton of challenge getting up and back. The first time I play through really any game like this. I put it on easy mode just to make sure I'm getting the rules right. Then I crank up the difficulty a little bit, and then I crank it up more. Basically, I'll keep cranking it up until I lose. And I got it to decently high before I got close to losing. I feel like because there are not a lot of outside elements coming in to get you, except the die roll, and the die roll, it can be bad, but if it's not, then nothing really happens. You're just paying your normal expense for any given round. It's just there wasn't a ton of interesting decisions. You have 3 tiles at any given point in your hand. You pick one, you put it out, and you move up. And sometimes you have good options, sometimes you don't, but you can kind of plan around those things. And having the Sherpa there to trade with at any point in time makes it a little bit easier. One game in particular, I got to the peak of the mountain, and I had the wingsuit, which you roll, and if you roll 1 through 4, you just sail all the way back down to the base camp. So I didn't even have to even deal with anything on the way back down, which it kind of took out half the game. Like, you didn't have to deal with that challenge of getting back down. So I don't know. I was expecting more, I think. And again, if you want to hear more about the competitive side of it, which I think is a much stronger game, definitely read the review, because there's a lot more elements there. You're kind of messing with each other. It's a little weird thematically. I don't know why you would try to trip somebody up if you're both climbing a mountain together. But it definitely has a different feel to it, and a little bit more of it's a little more tense. And then another thing too to mention is there is the Yeti expansion, which adds this little Yeti figure who moves around on the mountain trying to get you. He follows different routes based on different cards you pull. And if you run into him, it's not good. So it does add a little bit of a mitigating factor to getting up the mountain. You can't necessarily just go up in a straight line and get to the peak. You sometimes take a little bit more of a meandering path, which makes the game much harder because you're using more oxygen as you go. But that is an extra $20, $25 expansion you're throwing on top of a decently expensive game to add that element to it for the co-op and solo play. So it's not bad. I didn't dislike it. I just wasn't wowed. It wasn't like this engaging experience that I immediately wanted to do again. It was, all right, I get it. That was cool. It felt like a solo variant of a competitive game. And I was really hoping for more.
So the competitive game is definitely better. It is definitely a better game. And I think, like, theme-wise, I'm kind of imputing here, but like back in the 19th century when the great mountain climbers were thinking like Sir Edmund Hillary and, first person to climb Everest, like there was a real race to get to the top of these mountains. So, and there was a little bit of like shenanigans that happened among the climbers. So, but mountain climbing should be like a team sport, and it's hard and you have to work together. So it naturally lends itself to cooperative play. So wasn't too out of the theme, except that the competitive mode isn't just competitive. It's take that. And that's a barrier that I just couldn't cross mentally. Like I can understand racing somebody, but then, you give them a karma card and they lose a turn, or, they drop their items, or something bad happens to them. And yeah, you can't do it too often because that karma track is going to bite you in the butt eventually. But the fact that you're kind of looking, your mind space is there, like how can I screw my opponent like in a way that won't hurt me too much? That kind of crossed the line for me. Even though I will say as a game, the competitive mode is better. I agree with you. The cooperative mode, the board just doesn't do anything. Like it's either there or it's not there. Either it's there and you're climbing up ropes, or you get an avalanche card and it wipes it up, and then I got to rebuild my path again. It doesn't challenge you like if you get a cooperative game like Pandemic or Ghost Stories where you have to like manage multiple crises at once. Do I go here? Do I go there? Sounds like the Yeti does that, but not in the base game. It is kind of like inert, I suppose. Like the turns seem very deterministic. So I really wanted to like this game, and I'm sorry we're ending our grand review of 14 games in a little bit of a downer. But I don't know. I just had to put Summit on the top of these reviews. It's a good game. It's enjoyable for the competitive if you can kind of do that. The solo, yeah. There's a good game in there, and maybe the Yeti just makes it like that much of a really, really good game. But then you're talking $100, and for $100, now you're talking about like a giant scenario-based game. In this game, I'm not going to pay $100 if a game doesn't give me different scenarios. That's just my personal rules. So, that's kind of where it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tough because if that Yeti bit was built into this and that was part of the mechanisms of the solo play, I'd give it a stronger review. I can't say it is a better experience playing it solo or cooperative with the Yeti in there, but you shouldn't have to have that to make that work. So yeah, it's middling. I feel like there are probably people out there who would get more out of this. It's not a bad system. It's not, like you said, it doesn't have all those moving pieces that a lot of other solo co-op style games do to keep you on your toes. Cards come out and they hurt you. Okay. So,
all right, keep going.
Yep. Try again. You're low on oxygen now. Okay.
Go again. Yeah. So that was 14 reviews, and that is not even the extent of what has been played. We still have to review Ex Libris. We still have to review Dragonfire, the deck builder, which a lot of people are excited about. There's, more stuff that came out of Gen Con, and it's going to be more stuff. And Anthony Celesta play with Lisboa, which is something he's really looking forward to. We may just package that into a part 3, but I think I am good to go on these reviews. I'm ready to have a nice conversation with a game designer next time.
Yes, you'll take a break. All right, guys. So that is everything for this episode of Every Night is Game Night. Once again, make sure you connect with us in all the different places where we're at. On Twitter at ENGN_podcast, on Facebook in the Solo Board Game group or the Board Gamers Anonymous page, on BoardGamersAnonymous.com, or you can type in everynightisgamenight.com and go directly to this channel. Make sure you check us out on Patreon as well. Lots of good options there. We have a tier where you can tell us what game you want us to review, and we will do our best to track it down and give it a play. We also have a couple of other cool things on there. You can join us in Slack. You can join us at a convention that we happen to be at. Hopefully you can play a game together. So make sure you check that out. We'd love your support. Helps us get more stuff up on the podcast, do more exciting things, pay for all the hosting and everything of keeping the show up and running. But for this week, that's going to be everything. So until next time, grab a solo game off the shelf and let's make every night game night.
Later, everybody.